you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world.
This Thursday marks 80 years since tens of thousands of Allied servicemen stormed ashore at Normandy, France. It was called D-Day. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower called the invasion the Great Crusade. The challenge now is keeping alive the memories of that Great Crusade. Barry Peterson reports from Paris, France, and New Orleans.
Watch closely at this moment that will one day be gone forever.
That first time in combat, do you remember being nervous, or do you feel like your training had prepared you for that moment, or what were your feelings going into that?
You're always nervous when you know you're going to be in combat. And you're always nervous after you've been in combat. But for me, and I think most of my contemporaries, when we're in combat, no nerves at all, just doing your job.
A moment when you can talk to a World War II veteran like 99-year-old Steve Ellis, a gunnery officer on a Navy invasion landing craft in the Pacific.
I can still remember that we were on a resupply run in which we were under constant attack for 3 days, and I never got to bed.
He shares his stories at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans with seniors like Luke Suggs from Holy Cross High School.
What does it mean to you to hear him say that as opposed to reading it in a book?
I think it's very interesting at that moment, for me personally, to realize I'm really talking to someone who went through this and who was there that day.
Can't get it from a book, don't get it from a movie.
Exactly.
Got to get it from the guy.
Yes.
The guy who can tell you face to face exactly why he did it.
When people ask you, Steve, like, what was the point of the war in your mind? Why were you there? What do you answer?
Well, I guess I was there because it was expected of my generation that we take up the cause.
The cause as what?
Of freedom.
More than 16.4 million Americans served during the war. Today, fewer than 100,000 are left. And with the greatest generation almost gone, the museum is working hard to reach new generations. Like providing high school yearbooks from the war years as part of the course material sent to students across the country, says Chrissy Gregg, who heads the museum's education outreach.
Obviously the hairstyles are different, the slang, but there's some common things. There is chess club, and there is basketball, and there's prom.
Well, that really helps because now you're really talking about young people of the same age looking at the greatest generation when they were that age.
Yeah.
I can understand how that would really resonate.
Certainly.
The museum sends student reporters to places like Normandy, young people sharing stories with other young people.
A prominent observation point between Omaha and Utah Beach. This site earned the name Bloody Omaha.
Mark and Lisa Kramer taught D-Day by taking their children, Grant and Caroline, to Normandy. But first, Mark made them watch D-Day in the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan.
Grant had quite a bit of interest at that point in World War II, and I think it made it sink in a little deeper that war is a really terrible thing.
Grant, a high school sophomore, brought home a modern-day lesson.
We were a nation united behind the cause of democracy and freedom, and it seems like you have people today in our government, putting democracy up as a debate when it shouldn't be, especially not in the United States of America.
This is the Sherman tank.
Mike Bell spent his Army career in tanks and praises the ingenious tactics Allied soldiers used against the Germans.
So, for instance, they might fire white phosphorus smoke over a German tank, and it would suck the air into the German tank, and the crew would evacuate the tank. In American history,
he is executive director of the Jenny Craig Institute for the Study of War and Democracy at the museum. He can ponder the very real what if.
So, what would have happened if D-Day had failed?
If D-Day had failed, what's incredible is there's no backup plan. I think you could imagine that the oppressed peoples would not be liberated, or certainly would not be liberated in 1944 and 45. You can imagine the extent of the Holocaust, the other oppression, slave labor, how those would have continued under Nazi domination for years.
But it didn't fail. By day's end, the Allies had 156,000 servicemen on French soil. In a week, more than 320,000. In late August, in a major boost to Allied morale, American soldiers got their first glimpse of the Eiffel Tower as they fought their way into Paris and liberated the city. But there would be a lot more war to come. The Allies swept across France and into Germany until May of 1945, 11 months after the first soldiers came ashore at Normandy. The job was done. Germany surrendered. And at the same time, the Allies were waging a separate war in the Pacific to defeat the Japanese. As shown in this museum exhibit called The Road to Tokyo.
We try to create immersive environments.
Stephen Watson is the museum's president and CEO.
Real documents, real weapons, real uniforms, real armaments, helmets, maps, real things tell stories in a way that's authentic.
I feel like we're in a battle. I mean, you've created some of the sound, some of the effect, literally some of what the service people were going through.
That's right. It's a little bit overwhelming by design.
And other exhibits show how the war is part of our lives today.
If you think about jet engine technology, nuclear power, computers, medicine, plasma, the origins of a lot of the things that impact our daily lives today go back to this period of innovation when we needed solutions during World War II.
An estimated 2,500 Americans died just on D-Day. Fathers, husbands, sons, best friends. At the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial, each name has a story, each one worthy of honor. And teaching the story of their bravery to new generations is the debt we owe them. That is our debt of honor. For CBS Saturday Morning, Barry Peterson, Paris.
An incredible museum. It started off as a National D-Day museum off the real effort of Stephen Ambrose, the author of Band of Brothers. He wanted people to understand the sacrifice of Easy Company that went all the way to Berlin. And in so doing, they realized, you know what? We don't have a national museum on World War II, and we're going to make one here. And New Orleans, really banded together to make it happen.
It is amazing, those first-person accounts. Those are the things that we are losing. And when you see a child or somebody younger hear it, all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And it's always good to be reminded of that selfless, greatest generation in this age of self-promotion and everything else, just the sacrifice involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely.